L'choyle yamecha Keleilna Ayrifana Keilna Rifana Shilach Shilach Rifua Shleima Rifua Shleima L'choyle yamecha L'choyle yamecha I keilna Ayrifana Keilna Rifana Shilach Shilach Rifua Shleima Rifua Shleima L'choyle yamecha
Good evening. My name is Akiva Balter. On behalf of the Toronto Community Rabbanim, I'd like to welcome you all to a night of chizzuk and Tehillim on behalf of our community. Before I introduce Rabbi Heber, who initiated this evening in this important gathering, I just would like to go over some of the Zoom parameters. I'm assisted by Avigdor Hyman and Benny Feintuch. I will go over some of the details. Some of you have been in Zoom meetings. Some of you have had some experience to it. So I'm going to just take a few moments before Rabbi Heber comes on.
Rabbi Heber, we'll be starting with you now. Thank you.
Shalom Aleichem. Good evening and welcome to all members of the Toronto, Thornhill, and Richmond Hill communities that have joined us tonight. It is our fervent prayer that our efforts in organizing this Kinnus produce Kiddush Shem Shemayim, and that the strength of our tefillos, the tefillos of the Rabbim, the masses, awaken heavenly mercy, Rachamei Shemayim, for our community and the entire Klal Yisrael. Specifically, we collectively have in mind every individual who has become sick.
Shana says she wants to talk to mommy.
Who?
Shana, she wants to talk to mommy. Would you let?
Specifically, we collectively have in mind every individual who has become sick with COVID-19 amongst all the other cholim of Yisrael. Before we begin, we would like to express our appreciation, first and foremost, to the Toronto Community Rabbanim, whose idea it was to bring together 50 Kehilos Kedoshos in the GTA together in a Kinnus L'Shem Shemayim. Collectively, we express our Hakaras HaToiv, our collective appreciation to the rabbonim, our leaders, who will lead us in Tefillah, as well as those who will share words of chizzuk with the community. At this point, I have to mention that it is most unfortunate that Moirenu Harav Shlomo Miller Shlita is not feeling well and will not be able to share with us words of Torah and Chachma this evening. May Hashem send the Rosh HaKoilo Shlita a refuah shalema b'soich shar choyle Yisrael. And may we yet be zoiche to hear clarification of our questions in another forum very soon. I would like to thank Akiva Balter of GamZoomLtova for hosting and managing this evening's Kinnus. Finally, we would like to express our Hakaras HaToiv to Harav Yosef David Rothbart, who is the Halachic Administrator of Halacha Institute of Toronto, HIT, for helping with tonight's logistics. Rav David Shoichet Shlita is the Rav of Chabad Toronto, a member of the Beis Din, and the president of the Vada Rabbonim of Toronto. The Rav Shlita is from the Ziknei Rabbonim of our city and has served our community for more than 60 years. The Rav Shlita will now lead us in Kapitel Kuf Chaf Aleph.
Rabbi Heber, we can't identify Rabbi Shochet. If you could find if he's on, if he can identify himself.
Rav Shochet, are you on the Zoom?
Rabbi Heber, Baruch Hashem, we have maxed the room at 500 people. I'm going to be sending out a link shortly for anybody who wants to join on the internet and is able to see it. They won't be able to participate in the room, but they'll have a link to follow proceedings outside it. I'll send it out on the chat shortly.
Okay.
So Rabbi Heber, do you want to say the Tehillim in lieu of Rabbi Shochet?
I'm going to call upon Rabbi Umayri, Rabbi Felder to say Kapitel Kuf Chof Aleph. Can you identify Rabbi Felder?
Tzvi?
Yes. Go ahead, Rav.
Okay. Shalom Alois Esoina Eleorim Meyayin Yava Yezri Ezri Mimadoinai Oisei Shamayim Varetz Al Yitein Lamoit Raglecha Al Yanum Shoimrecha Hine lo yanu v'lo yishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilecha, al yad yaminecha. Yoimam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach b'loila. Adonai yishmorecha mikol ra, yishmoer es nafshecha. Adonai Yishmor Tzeisecha Vayecha Me'ata V'ad Olam.
Thank you, Harav Felder Shlita. Rabbi Avram Bartzfeld Shlita has been the spiritual leader of congregation-based Toiv Yosef, which is located in the Bathurst and Wilson neighborhood. Prior to coming to Toronto, Harav Bartzfeld served as Rav in Mexico City for many years. Rabbi Bartzfeld is especially renowned as the author of the very popular Ask the Rabbi Forum on the From Toronto website, in which he answers hundreds of practical questions on a daily basis. The Rav Shlita will now lead us in Kapitel Kuf Lamed.
Shira Malois Mimama Kim Korosicho Adonai Adonai Shimo Bekoili Tienos Necho Kashubois Leko Bobol Tachanunoi Imavoino Bobois Tishmorio Adonai Miyamoit Kimcho Aslicho Leman Tiborei Kivisi Adonai Kivsom Navshi Belid Boroi Hoi Cholti Navshi Ladoinoi Mishoimrim Lavoiker Shoimrim Lavoiker Yachel Israel El Adonai Kim Adonai Achesed Vecharbei Moi Fedus Vehuivdes Israel Mikol Avoinoi Sof.
Yasher Koyach Harav Bartzfeld Shlita.
Shkoyach to you and all you people. Shkoyach.
Rav Uri Kaufman Shlita is the Rav of Agudas Yisrael South, Anshe Kiels. Rabbi Kaufman is a renowned mechanech who served as a longtime Rebbe and principal in Eitz Chaim Boys School for decades. Following the recital of the next kapitel by Rav Kaufman, Rabbi Yosef Oziel Shlita will lead us with the recital of Achenu and the Mishaberach for Cholim. Rav Yosef Oziel is the Rav of Petach Tikva Anshe Castilla, Toronto's first Sephardic synagogue. Rav Oziel is also a member of the Beis Din of Toronto and the Vada Rabbanim of Toronto. When Rav Oziel recites the Mishaberach for Cholim, he will pause when he comes to the names so that everybody can individually recite the names of the Cholim to be included in the Mishaberach. First, Rav Kaufman Shlita will now lead us in Tehillim Kapitel Kuf Mem Beis, followed by Rabbi Oziel with Achenu and Mishaberach.
Maskil David, Yosoy Bamoros Vila, Koili Eladino Edo, Koili Eladino Yesano, Eshboy Lefanov Sichi. Tzorosi lefonov agi. Isatei polai uchi. Yato yodat onesibasi. Be'orech zu alef tanu pachli. Habeit yamin orei v'yedi makir. Ovad manois mimeni ein doirei. So after you left, I don't know. You might be at home. I feel healthy. We have a safe. Hakshiva rinosi kidalo isimio. Asilei mi roifai ki amso mimeni. I see him asking I feel like that. I said, Shemecho, Biachtu Tzadikim, Kisigmol, Eloi.
אחינו כל בית ישראל הנתונים בצרה ובשביה, העומדים בין בים ובין ביבשה, המקום ירחם עליהם, ויוציאם מצרה לרווחה, ומאפלה לאורה, ומשעבוד לגאולה, השתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן. מי שברך אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, משה, אהרון, דוד ושלמה, הוא ירפא, הוא יברך וירפא את החולים, בעבור שכל הקהל מתפללים בעבורם, בשכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם, להחלימם ולרפאותם, ולחזיקם ולחיותם, ישלח להם מהרה רפואה שלמה מן השמיים, לאיבריהם וגידיהם, בתוך שאר חולי ישראל, רפואת הנפש ורפואת הגוף, השתה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ונאמר אמן.
Amen. Now that we have concluded the tefillah portion of the Kinnus, we would like to proceed with words of chizzuk. Harav Moshe Mordechai Lowy Shlita needs no introduction. Moiri Harav Shlita has been the Rav of Agudas Yisrael of Toronto for almost 4 decades. Rav Lowy is a member of the Beis Din and the Vada Rabbanim of Toronto. The Rav is a renowned posek and is consulted in all matters of halacha and of hadracha by a wide spectrum of Toronto community members, as well as way beyond. It is a personal honor for me to introduce the Rav Shlita, as I was one of the many boys who grew up in Agudas Yisroel, Bitzel Kinofov, under his tutelage. On behalf of the Toronto Community Rabbanim, it gives me great pleasure to call upon Rabbi Lowy Shlita to say introductory remarks of chizzuk and hadracha to the entire community. Harav Lowy Shlita.
Shus all the rabbonim, shus kol kedosha, and thank you, Rabi Tzvi Shlita, for arranging and organizing this whole thing. It's a beautiful thing for Klal Yisrael, and especially for Toronto. And we know the Rambam brings down. In the beginning, we just had the Tainus. And the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchos Tainus, mitzvahs esem in HaTorah. It's a mitzvah esem in HaTorah anytime Al Kol Tzorah Shloitavai, any tzorah that happens, Lizzoik v'la'ariya, to daven and to be ma'ayra people. So to come together, especially now where there's a second wave coming, and first we have to mention the Gadol Ha'ir, Rabbi Reb Shlomo Miller shall have a before Shleim of Shal Yisrael, Shlomo Yov and Hindas Balter, and all the Chaylim and all the families that need chizzuk and condolence, and all those who need refuahs all over the world. We're going through a time, a pandemic. No one ever thought, and no one fathomed last year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when we daven, that we will go through such a shutdown, a lockdown, not being able to see each other, not be able to be with the family, not be able to. It's a time of a tzorah and Klal Yisrael. And the mitzvah is by a tzorah. It's a mitzvah of Kol Tzorah Shetava Lizoik, like we came together to daven, and to be ma'ir people to what we do. First, how do we get chizzuk in a time like this? Everyone's going around. We're worried. Sometimes we can't go to simchas. We can't make simchas. We can't make even levayas. We can't make brisson the way you should. We can't make bar mitzvahs the way you should. The Rabbanim want something from us, but how do we get chizzuk? We're reading now the parshas in the Torah, like the swarming down. These parshas are really the ikar, what you have to learn. How did the Avos live? Yosef HaTzadik went through the worst sorrows. If you think of his life, a 17-year-old boy, his brothers take him. If you ever saw the Yosef spiel, it's so heart-rendering. They take this little Yosef, who was loved by his father, the Ben Zekunim of his father, the beloved child by his father, and they take him. They want to kill him. They throw him into a pit. They sell him. He's sold from one to another. Then he becomes a slave for years, and then he has the Mesiras Nefesh, the Nesoyon. Then he's again put in prison again for 2 years. Just imagine those 12 years, 13 years. What gave him the chizzuk to be what he was at the end? Yosef HaTzadik mitchalosay atzoyfay. He never lost any hope in any betochen and divine shloim. I think if you look in the parsha, you see what gave him the hope, and that's what gives us hope. It says, when he told his brothers, "Go up to my father, Koyama bincha Yosef." Your son Yosef says, "Samani Elokim." The Rabbi Shalom made me Elokim Moshe L'chol Mitzrayim. He made me be the ruler in whole Mitzrayim. Redo alai v'al tamid. Come fast to me and don't wait. He wants to tell his father, and those are the words he said, tell our father. He tells the father that he became the Moshel in Mitzrayim. That was the big Yaakov Avinu, who was the Bechir Shabbat. This is what his big nachas is, that in Mitzrayim, that time, which was the Teves from the whole world, he's the ruler in Mitzrayim. That's why that's going to make his father happy, and his father's going to run down to see him. And the Mepharshim bring down that that's one of the things that he was worried about, till he saw the Agolos, that he remembered the Egla Rufa, remembered what he learned. He was worried what happened to my Yosef all those years. But there's a beautiful pshat. So Shlomo brings pshat, others bring, it doesn't say Elikim Samani. Samani Elikim, the Moshe V'chol Eretz Mitzrayim. It says, Samani, I made Elikim, the Rebbeinu Hashem's name should be Moshe V'chol Mitzrayim. I made Hashem's name known. Everything that happened, I said Elikim. And that's why I said, Lo yatim shalachtem Elikim shalachani v'shalchain Elikim Elikim chashava l'toiva. Everything is from the Rebbeinu Shlita. Yosef HaTzadik knew everything that is happening is from the Rebbeinu Shlita. If he's going through all these sorrows, he's being thrown into a pit, he's being hated by his brothers, he's going to be a slave, he's taken from one to another slave. Just imagine being sold as a slave. Here's the special Yosef HaTzadik, who was the Liebling by his father, the Liebling, and all of a sudden he becomes a slave, and he has to be a slave for all the years, and he has to be imprisoned afterwards for 2 years. But he knew Elikim Shalachani, Elikim Shashava L'Toiva. Everything that Rebbeinu Hashem does is L'Toiva. Everything, and so he says, Tzemani, I made Elikim Moshe Eretz Mitzrayim. I made Rebbeinu Hashem's name in Eretz Mitzrayim. He said, tell my father, what I did all these years is I remembered always Elikim. I remembered Rebbeinu Hashem was with me. Whatever happened to me, I know the Rebbeinu Hashem is with me. Whatever happens is always from the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's what we have to remember. The pandemic didn't come from Wuhan, didn't come from China. It came from the Rebbeinu Shalom. If the pandemic happens, it's from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the Rebbeinu Shalom means that everything that's happening is from Hashem. Hashem is with us. And everything that's happening is from the Rebbeinu Shalom. What is our obligation? What do we have to do? We have to remember that, 70 years ago, when our parents were in concentration camps, and our parents were made mamish downtrodden and made to feel like they're not dehumanized. And we, Baruch Hashem, still have our homes, we still have our food, so sometimes it's not the way we want it. But the Rebbeinu Hashem wants something. So the Rambam says, what do you have to do? It's from the derech tshuva that if a tzara comes, lahariya, you have to go and be ma'ir and lizag and to daven, and to know that why does this happen? Because Rebbeinu Hashem wants us to do tshuva, and if you do tshuva, Yosser, the tzara will go away. But chas v'sholem, continues the Rambam Melocha Gimel, v'mlo yiz'aku v'yiriyu, they won't daven and they won't do tshuva, and they won't go come together, and they say, just it's a mikra. So there's no pandemic, there's no corona around. It's not around. It's not here. You're being a sadist because you're causing it to cope more and more and more. And the Rambam continues that if a person doesn't go and we don't do tshuva, and it's going to people a dobek medarka mara because they don't do tshuva, hoisif tzoras matzoras. There's a second wave. There's a new wave from England. There's new. Rabbi Hashem is waking us up. Rabbi Hashem with this pandemic wants something from us. The pandemic didn't come, so the pandemic came so we should do tshuva. We should know that what's built Rabbi Hashem. Look what Rabbi Hashem wants. The Gadol Ador, Reb Chaim Shlita, Chaim said right away that you see one of the things Rabbi Hashem wants from us is our speech. We have to put on masks. You have to be careful. And it comes, the whole pandemic comes from our mouth. We shouldn't hurt people with our mouth. Lashon hara, machloikus. Be careful what we do. Be careful what we do. We want to take away the tzara. The only way you could take away the tzara is if you go and you understand that it's not a mikra. The Rambam continues, but if you say it's only a mikra, it's just a happening, then the Rebbeinu Hashem will be go also with care. If you say it's a mikra, it's a pandemic. It's not even so bad. You can do it, people get better. If you don't see the Rebbeinu Hashem wants something from us, Chas v'sholom, that's why it's going. And look how many people we lost in our community. Tomorrow night is the Shloshim of Agon, Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner Zechariah Bracha. Rabbi Kerzner, who was the Rav in the city, was one of the main leaders in the community. Used to be was the head of the Barakashrus in COR, and everything in community. Everything was in him. He took care of the Chav Kedusha, took care of the mikveh. Everything was in his community. And a person who he was Roish Medabrim L'chol Davar. He was the Roish Medabrim. Anytime he came, any Kinnus, we had anything. He was the orator par excellence. That everywhere, Teres Emes Hoisa Befiu, like the pasuk says. The Torah of Emes was in his mouth. In some injustices never came out of his mouth. He was a person that Teres Emes. If he came to a convention and he wanted to, people were coming and speaking against Gedolim, he stood up and fought for them. Every meeting he fought for the Emes, but always without avla, without hurting anybody. But Sholach, the Misha Halachiti, the Rabbi Heber, and he was a person who brought so much shalom. I remember at one of the Kinnusim we had, but one of the tragedies we had in the community, he got up and spoke. He said, people are, if someone's a little more from than me, he's too from. And someone's a little less from, he's not from. If he's not exactly the way I am, then he's two or less or nothing. Person tolerance. The Rabbi wants a Baruch Hashem, it's so beautiful tonight when we all come together, all the whole community together. I mean, it's the biggest tshuva we could do. All of us coming together for one purpose. To ask the Rabbi Hashem to be mispala, he should take away this sorrow. We want to do tshuva. Tshuva means also there's once a city where a pandemic happened. When the Gedolim was the Rav in that city, and they got the whole city together, like in the Rambam, the Gemara brings down, the Rambam Shulchan Aruch brings down that you get the whole city together and you see what are the things we have to be massacred in the city, and they were trying to see what are the things. There was one person who didn't come to that meeting, to the shul. The whole everyone came to daven, and they went to the Rav sent a shliach to go check up on that person. He went and looked at that person. He saw that person in the middle of the night was going out to the forest. He was going out to the forest. And he heard him crying. He was saying, Tin Chatzois. So then the Rav himself said, let me go see what he's doing. So the Rav next night went out and he saw there was saying Tin Chatzois, someone was with him. So later in the morning, he went over to him and he said, where were you? Who was the person with you? He said, the person with me was Yirmiyahu Hanavi. I say every night in Chatzois, I go there, and he comes to me together. He says, you know what, if Yirmiyahu comes to you, ask him, how can we stop this pandemic? How can we stop it? What are the things we have to stop? So the next day, he came to Beis Medrash, he said, I spoke to Yirmiyahu Hanavi. He said, the cover of Beis Medrash. He saw the Rabbi Shalom locked us out of the shuls. Rabbi Shalom, at times, we're talking about the times, we can't go to shul. This time it wasn't done in Rishus. It wasn't done because they didn't want us to go to shul. But for some reason, the Rabbi locked us out of the shuls. Even now, you could only have minimum people coming to shul. The Rabbi is saying something. Maybe we don't give the proper cover to shul. Do we bring a cell phone and talk in shul? Do we talk in shul Dvarim B'Teilim? Do we talk in shul Lashon Hara? Do we make machlokes in shul? Do we give the proper cover in shul? Do we learn the way we should? Do we daven the way we should? The Rabbi is showing us something. If you do, now in Belgium they tried the abolishing shchita. So in the 1930s, when they wanted to abolish shchita in Europe, so the Gedolim all said that time that if the Rabbi makes you should abolish shchita, it means that we're not keeping it properly. If we would give the proper cover, it wouldn't happen. If we have to have social distance, is a symptom that we don't have our social. Our behavior is not close enough to other people. Rabbi makes that we have to put on masks. Rabbi is telling us you're not talking properly. Rabbi is telling us work on your baned machaver. Don't hurt people. Be nice to people. Be mevater. It's easy not to speak lashon hara when it's not really negeya. When it really hurts, that's when you don't speak lashon hara. Don't make a machlokes when it really hurts. That's when that's what shows. In 1918. And in Yerushalayim, when they had the pandemic there, they had a cholera outbreak. So they also came back together and they came out that maybe they should go, that they should go have a chassan and a kalahu or yisoimim who can't get married. and they should be able to get married and make a chasna for them. They went and made the chasna for them near the Har HaZeisim, and the whole pandemic stopped. And the same thing, that story with the other, when he came here, Mir Navi, we want to stop this pandemic. Rabbi Hashem sent us now the vaccine, and everyone should take the vaccine. It's people all of a sudden are worried about the vaccine. All the other medicines, they're not worried about what they take. All the other food that goes into their mouth, they're not worried about. Baruch Hashem sent us this vaccine. Is sent from the Rabbi Shlita. It's but it has to go with our tshuva, the way we interact with each other, the way we daven, the way the Rabbi closes schools, yeshivas, and we have to fight for yeshivas. Means we don't give the proper cover to the yeshivas. Do we support the Rebbeim properly? We support the teachers properly. Do we make sure that we give the proper cover? That's what the Rebbeim wants from us. If the Rebbeim will see us, like the Rambam says, that like we do now together, we're coming together. Lahariya, we come together, and we come and Lizoik, we daven together, and we ma'ir together. This will take away the tzara. It will take away. The Rebbeim will help that this vaccine should help and should take away and eradicate it. So, when we started Tafshin Pei, we didn't know it meant Tia Shnas pandemic. We know the word Pei meant there will be a Shnas pandemic. This year we have the Tia Tafshin Pei Aleph. It's Tia Shnas pandemic ayin. It will go away. The Rebbeim should help us coming together and doing what the Rambam says the mitzvah is. B'schus we'll go listen to Rabbi Reisman Shlita, and we'll be ma'ir, and first we have to have chizzuk, that it's all from the Rabbi Shlita. It's all coming, everything that happens from the Rabbi Shlita is with us. And so beautiful how our community responded, even in the lockdown, the program, the Zalazeh, people helped each other, the Vikachaylim, all the programs, everyone helped each other, the yeshivas, the Rebbeim giving shurim, the Torah that's being learned through Zoom. We have to thank, it's unbelievable, the Torah that's being learned all over. Some people tell me they never learned as much. So we're showing the Rabbi Shalom that we know it's from him, and we're doing tshuva, b'schus tshuva, which be zoicha, that pandemic should go away, the Torah should go away, and be zoicha to the emissary geula that we're waiting for, the geula of Bias HaGoyel b'meher b'yameinu. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Lowy Shlita. Your words of hadracha and your chizzuk, your strength and your guidance have left us truly inspired. May it be Hashem's will that the Rav Yizoicha, that he should merit arichas yamim v'shanim, many long and healthy years, together with your mishpacha and your special Kehila Agudas Yisrael. And may he give you strength to continue providing guidance to the entire community and beyond. Ad Meya ve'esrim shana.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rabbi Yisroel Reisman Shlita, Rav of Agudas Yisrael of Madison in Brooklyn, New York. Rabbi Reisman is one of the Rashi Yeshiva in Yeshiva's Torah V'das, where he himself learned and received smicha from Rav Avram Yaakov Pam Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Rabbi Reisman is perhaps most widely known for his popular weekly lecture on Tanakh, which is attended each week by hundreds of people across North America. It is our great pleasure and our extreme honor to call upon Rabbi Yisroel Reisman Shlita, who will address the Toronto community from New York. Before we hear Rabbi Reisman, I just want to point out that the Zoom room has been expanded. So if you know anybody who was not able to get on, please let them know that they can join now to hear Rav Reisman Shlita. And without further ado, let us have the shuls of Rabbi Reisman.
One of the highlights of the annual Torah of Masorah convention is the question and answer session, where mechanchim have opportunities to ask questions of the Gedolei Hadar. A number of decades ago, when my Rebbe, Rav Pam, was on this board, he was asked the following question and provided the following answer, and this is recorded in the Sefer Meir Tzedek on page Kuf Mem Zayin. The question asked the following: He was asking about the davening of his young Talmidim. Should the children daven most of the davening and not even know what they're saying? Or perhaps, it may be better to teach them the meaning of that which they're davening. Let them daven less. But at least they'll know what they're talking about. Now, from the language of the question, it appears to me that it was very clear what the Rebbe's opinion was. He certainly felt, isn't it better to daven the shorter davening and know what you're saying, rather than the whole davening and not know what you're saying? I'd like to read to you the response of Rav Pam. Rav Pam answered, Ein litzafos she'yavinu ha-talmidim es ha-tefillah. The goal is not that children should understand the davening. Sheyispalu b'kavana, b'yoladim tzeirim, that young boys should daven with proper kavana. Ha'ikaru. The main job in chinuch shetzrichin lehisragel b'tefillah. Regilus, they have to become accustomed to davening. It's a good idea to tell them something about what the tefillah means. But not that they should sit and learn the davening. What children need is lahargil es atzmam b'tefillah, to get themselves accustomed to davening. The message here is that in chinuch of children, hergel, getting used to doing something, being accustomed to doing something, is crucial. A Yid knows when he wakes up in the morning, there's a certain hergel, there's a certain practice that we do. We're trained from when we're young children. We wake up, we wash our hands properly, we get ready for shul, we say Berchas HaTorah and Berchas HaShachar, and we daven. That hergel is the foundation of Yiddishkeit, and it's the main idea in chinuch. This idea, which Rav Pam said at that time, has a halachic source in Rabbeinu Manayach. Rabbeinu Manayach is one of the mefarshim on the Rambam in the halachis of Shvisas Asar, the halachis of Yom Kippur. And here, Rabbeinu Manayach in Perek Beis writes, to explain the idea of training children to fast, by training them to fast a partial day, even though there's no mitzvah to fast a partial day, but getting them used to it. In that context, Rabbeinu Manayach says, Trei chanuch yesh. There are two aspects to chinuch. One aspect of chinuch is to have children, before bar mitzvah, start to perform mitzvahs properly. And certainly that's what we do. We give our children an esrig, we give our children a siddur, we give our children svarim, we teach them, we have them listen to the blowing of the shofar as they reach the proper age of chinuch. However, there's a second aspect. Lulmaid ulahar gil bonav b'darchei hayosher. Again, the word lahar gil bonav. Hergel. You got children accustomed to it. As an example, if a person would find himself in a situation where he could not give his child a proper esrig, but he can give him a posel esrig, and the child will think it's kosher. Well, there's no kiyum mitzvah. For an adult, there's no reason to take a posel esrig if you don't have a kosher one. But if you want to train a child, lahargiloi, to get him accustomed, you can do that with a posel esrig. So that trei chinuch yesh. There's the technical din of chinuch, and then there is what I would think is the more important part of chinuch, the part where a child grows up in the context of a life of a frum yid. And the key word here is the word hergel. I bring this up today because Jews all over the world find themselves in a shas tzara. In a terrible time, the COVID pandemic, which was suddenly burst upon the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu caused major cities in the world, all the areas in which from Yidden are found, to go through rolling periods of greater difficulty, greater challenge, illness, Rachmana litzlan, death, and perhaps more significantly, lockdowns and a change in the style of life. What has become obvious during this pandemic is that from a Yidden, more than anyone else, need each other. We live communal lives. We live lives as members of a community. We come to shul in the morning and the evening, and sometimes in between, we give tzedakah together, we help the needy together, we learn together, we study together, we enjoy our simchas together, and most importantly, we live a life that has a set schedule, a herigel. I can go here on King's Highway and see two people running onto the train. One is a secular person who rolled out of bed 5 or 10 minutes ago, grabbed his coffee, his knapsack, and is now running into the train station. The other is an Orthodox Jew, somebody who already put in a packed morning, who got up early, perhaps learned to daf, went through his davening, and now he's heading to the train to go to work. It's a totally different life. Very often, a Rav is faced with people who have challenges. The fellow who won the lottery rarely goes to his Rav to ask him for advice. The fellow who's ill or facing other challenges does. And that's the job of a Rav, to give chizzuk. And very often the question is, why is God making this happen? I don't know. Nobody knows. But one message is clear and must be given to anybody facing a challenge. There's a lot of pain in this world. There's a lot of tsar. Very few people go through life without one or two, sometimes more major challenges. We're here to grow from it, to become better, to strengthen ourselves. Our goal should be, when we look back at our time of challenge, to feel, I dealt with it well. I went through it with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when a person is diagnosed, lo aleinu, with an illness, that's the message. It's for a purpose. Someday you'll be past this and you'll look back. You want to be able to tell yourself, I dealt with it well. I dealt with it properly. And that's a goal. It's a worthwhile goal. And just like in the physical world, you can't build muscles without lifting heavy weights, in the spiritual world too. For a person to be zeicha to the eternal good, a person has to lift some very heavy weights. Very often, it's hard to define the challenge. During the period of a lockdown and the disruption of the normal scheduled life of an Orthodox Jew, the challenges often have to do with that loss of herigel.